IEP process, parents make requests, right? Teams discuss those requests, and teams determine responses or ideas related to that request. Is there a good go-to format in the notes to document requests and discussions that come along with those requests that come from parents or advocates?
You know, Brian, when I think about that, I usually try to document what the parent's requesting, and I try to get as much specific information about their request as I can. For an example, the parent says, "My kid needs a one-on-one." Why do you think that? Tell me more about that. What concern are you really focused on with that request? And so we discuss that as a team once we get a really clear idea of what the request is. And then, of course, the team's response to that request. It may be that we need to look at behavior because the parent's saying, "I need a one on one because my kid's behavior is out of control." When really we might be looking at a behavior support plan, we might be looking at an FBA. So they may start with the end in mind, but we have to really break down what the concern was so that we can make sure that our response is appropriate, aligned with what their actual concern was.
Mhm. And then if we get to a situation where there's disagreement about the request and a prior written notice is necessary, um, are those well detailed notes that discuss the parent request and the discussion after that pretty helpful in developing those prior written notices? That was kind of a leading question. Sorry.
I'll jump in there. Absolutely. Anytime that the district SELPA department needs to respond in writing to a parent request, we are always going to go first to the IEP itself and to the notes. We're going to read the notes in detail and see what the team considered, what the team discussed, and how do they respond, and what was their reason for choosing that response. And so those notes are really important. We may also, after that, contact the case manager, et cetera, but that is definitely very important that we have it documented, the why behind it.
And then procedurally, I'm sure there's some stuff. Obviously, we're documenting the request in the notes page, and we're documenting the discussion in the notes page. But if the parent doesn't agree to the team's determination on the request, what needs to be done in addition, not only in the notes page what needs to be documented, but after the notes page is documented, the IEP is complete. Is there something that team members need to make sure they take care of?
I'll jump in on this one. So, there is a common misbelief or misconception that the district has a notes reader or an IEP reader. We do not read your IEPs unless you bring to our attention that there's something worthy of a review. And so, really reaching out to your program specialist or a SELPA administrator, letting them know we had a conversation at an IEP. I need further support on this. We had to respond that a prior written notice would be provided. The more detail you can give us, the better, so that we can support you in solving the disagreement or solving where a parent needs a response. But we're not going to know that needs to happen unless you bring it to our attention.
That's a good point, Chris. And I just like to say that we need to know that as soon as possible. So I know that there is no definite hard and fast timeline for responding to a parent, but our district does like to respond within a reasonable amount of time. I think it's like within 2 weeks or 14 days. So the sooner we get that information, we can contact you, we can do all the research we need to do in order to develop or to respond to the parent with a prior written notice. So we definitely need that information as soon as possible.
You know, Brian, one more thing to add is when I know that when we disagree with what the parent has requested and we have sufficient information, one thing that I do like to try to do is to schedule a follow-up meeting where we can specifically address any of the concerns if that's what's appropriate.
I think that's helpful, John, when maybe the parent brings up a concern you weren't expecting. And you really need to be able to collect some data and get back together to discuss it further. So it's not a no, it's a let us look at this. Can we meet again in 30 days or 15 days to discuss this concern in detail with the data that we have or we have collected? So I love that idea.
And I did want to point out on this slide 14, number 3, how important it is that to actually write in team has denied parent request if it in fact is denied, and that the district will respond to parents' request in writing. Actually put that verbiage in there. It's very helpful that the parent understands what's the next step, so that they don't just feel like their request kind of dropped off and is not being considered.
Michelle, I really like that you said that, because I was at an IEP and the team was not in agreement with the request that the parent had made. And I just looked at the parent and I said, this is not the end. I said, I will take your request to the district office, and the district office will look deeper and they will respond to your request with a prior written notice. And so this is not a definite no. This is just what the team is saying. Based on the information that we have, we're saying that we believe that we are meeting the students' needs. But when we go to the district office, it's still another level of support for you.
And I'm sure it's so important that those things happen. I know, like the last item says that to send an email within 24 hours, because when there's a parent request in an IEP, and I know you mentioned this, Crystal, a minute ago, a timeline starts, right? So if a parent requests an assessment, for example, in an IEP, we've got 15 days from that request to get them an assessment plan, not 15 days from when, you know, you send your email to the program specialist 3 days later. So it's important to do that stuff with a little bit of urgency after it's documented in the notes as well, and communicate to those who need to know about those requests.
Thank you for that clarification, Brian, because I did say there isn't a hard and fast timeline, but there are for some things, such as when there's an assessment that's requested. So thank you for that clarification.
So we have a whole bunch of required team members in an IEP, obviously, and we spoke a little bit about them a moment ago. You know, we have the list of everybody who's participating in the IEP on the, we list everybody on the notes page as meeting participants. Is it important in the notes page to document how each team member participated?
It's a really good question. I think the notes should clearly define each person's contribution as best as possible, whether that be asking questions or providing an answer. I know when it comes to, for example, parent questions, usually, and we addressed this previously, I will type in the notes that parents asked and then special ed teacher responded. So we know specifically who said what and have that documented in the notes.
I do want to point out there that the red note, the red part of the arrow, again, this is a summary. So although we want to have enough information, this is not a running record of the dialogue that takes place.
I was a general education teacher for many years, as well as a special education teacher. And I know that sometimes in our meetings, general education teachers don't have a lot to say or don't understand that there's an expectation that they still participate. I can tell you that as a gen ed teacher, my first couple years of IEPs, I thought my job was to sit and be quiet unless I was addressed with a question. So you may look at that when you're looking at a gen ed teacher who's not participating, and it may not be because they don't want to, but they're not sure when or how to do so. But it is important when we're discussing a least restrictive environment and progress on goals, present levels for our RSP students who have a gen ed teacher majority of the day. A lot of their IEP is coming from that gen ed teacher who's sitting there silently. So we can prompt them to participate if we need them to give input. And please make sure that they know, I do want you to share. I do want you to have work samples ready so that we can show the parent how we're both collaboratively working for student success. After many, many years and having a really good RSP teacher that trained me, I would actually bring up my own file to the IEP of work samples. And I then understood when we were going over present levels and goals, that was a chance for me to speak up and share what I knew. But until I had been taught that, I didn't understand what my role really was as a gen ed teacher in IEPs.
You know, Crystal, when I was in the classroom, I taught Mod Severe, and the students didn't participate in academics that often for during their mainstream time. So I would definitely have a conversation with the general education teacher prior to the meeting about how they could participate in the IEP. And we always looked at mainstreaming for our students, even if it wasn't for academics, it was to generalize those learning to learn behaviors. So I would ask the general education teachers to share, you know, socially, what are the expectations in the classroom? What are the academic expectations? What in light of Common Core, that's when we had just transitioned over to Common Core. And so when the teacher would share that information, that would give us opportunities to look to see, maybe my student could participate in this time in your classroom. So maybe it was just calendar time and just learning how to sit and respond, to generalize those learning to learn behaviors. So I would have a conversation with the teacher, and that would help to prompt them to know what to say in the IEP.